Hello and welcome to Court Games, a Legend of the Five Rings podcast, funded by the Legend of the Five Rings Discord community Patreon.
This podcast will focus on the role-playing game stories and lore for Legend of the Five Rings.
I'm Korvar.
And I am Kikita Kaori. And we have a special guest today, which is always our favorite, Marie Brennan. We are going to be talking today with Marie about her new book, which is Game of 100 Candles. And we're going to be talking about Yumido. So, welcome, Marie.
Glad to be here again.
But first, we got some news, right?
We're going to kick off with some news. There are some Legend of the Five Rings events happening at Gen Con. Actually, quite a few, which is pleasing.
More than I thought that there would be, to be honest.
Yeah. I'm especially glad to see Heroes of Rokugan. They've got a new season, which I was not expecting, because I always associate them with stuff that in the past, but now they're doing a new season, which I think is really cool. So they're like a huge kind of, I'm not quite sure it's a living campaign, but it's a thing everybody can kind of contribute to, and a series of adventures.
Right. So they are doing their living campaign. They are doing it with 5th edition L5R. So they have made that shift out of the previous AEG editions into FFG, and whole new, starting from scratch, whole new empire. So if you ever wanted to get into Heroes of Rokugan from the beginning, this is the year to do it.
Yeah. So starting that new season, there's going to be a battle interactive and live action roleplay, which has always been a feature of the Heroes of Rokugan. So if you're going to go to Gen Con, then that sounds like a fantastic thing to get involved in.
Mm-hmm. And we have a couple of different organizations, I guess, doing independent L5R campaigns. Yeah, one group is Tabletop Gamers, which is a RPG group focusing on the LGBT community, and they kind of have made a role-playing game that they are working on in L5R called The Emperor's Due, learning 5th edition in kind of a very welcoming, open and sort of environment. And then Edge Studio actually has a bunch of games that they're running. They have a campaign a game called The Lost Rider, which is in 5th edition. And they have a game called Storm Eel's Rest, which is in Adventures in Rokugan. So there are those out there for you. And there's an L5R card game tournament for people who are interested. So that was a lot more events than I expected. Yeah,
so if you're going to go to Gen Con, we would love to hear what your experiences were. Mm-hmm. And if you weren't sure if you're going, maybe this is going to push you over the edge, as it were, and send you off.
But that's a lot of news. So now we get to talk to Marie again. So we have interviewed you before when Night Parade of 100 Demons came out, and followed the adventures of Agasha Ryatora and Asako Sekken, I hope I'm saying those right, and investigating the dragon village of Sebomura. And we used a lot of your ideas for our Chiksudo episode not too long ago. So
I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, it was great. We enjoyed that. And we also enjoyed, especially now that I finally got to read it all, a Game of 100 Candles, which is like continuing the adventures of those two heroes.
Yep. For anyone who's new to the podcast and possibly new to the book series and doesn't know you very well, do you want to give a quick introduction to yourself, especially as it comes to L5R?
I've been writing fantasy novels and short fiction for, horrifyingly at this point, I could say decades, basically. I think my first short story came out nearly 20 years ago. Most well known for the Memoirs of Lady Trent series. First book is A Natural History of Dragons, but I've also been collaborating with my friend Alyss Helms under the name M.A. Carrick, and we're writing the Rook and Rose epic fantasy trilogy. Last book of that will be out in August. But I've been a fan of Legend of the Five Rings ever since a friend said, like, hey, you want to play in my tabletop game? And I said, sure. And shortly after that, I was writing for the game, which tells you how fast I fell.
Can you give us sort of a summary of your new book? Anything you want to say about it for Game of 100 Candles?
Sure. It's always a little tricky with this sort of thing because, spoilers for the first book in the series. Just, broadly speaking, the first book takes place in this rural village in Dragonlands. And so for the second book, I dragged my characters to Winter Court in Phoenix Lands instead. So a very different venue for them. And in particular, that's where Seken is from. He's used to it. But Yotora is completely fish out of water, kind of as Seken was in the rural village. That might have been on purpose on my part. And, Yotora is there specifically to negotiate with the Phoenix about what's going to happen with Seibomura as a result of the events in the first book. But that's kind of the reason that he's there. It's not really the plot, which is that strange things began happening at Winter Court. Specifically, people began falling asleep and being found in really odd places asleep and not waking up. And so the two of them have to investigate what's going on.
So what is the Game of 100 Candles in historical Japan? We know that the Night Parade of 100 Demons was a theme that came up. What's the Game of 100 Candles?
So the tradition that this comes from in Japanese history and like folklore and such is actually called the Hyakumonogatari Kaidankai, which is a gathering of 100 supernatural tales. It's not actually called the Game of 100 Candles. That's L5R's name for it. I will admit, as a novelist, I was like, Game of 100 Candles makes a better title for the novel. So yeah. I'm glad with there being an L5R specific name. But I do put a little shout out to the Japanese tradition in the novel where I have Yotora, somebody brings up the Game of 100 Candles. And he's like, oh, we have that in Dragonlands too, but we call it a gathering of 100 supernatural tales. Because I wanted to nod toward its real world name. But it's a storytelling kind of game where there's some variance on how exactly it gets set up and played, but the gist of it is that you've got basically two rooms that are adjoined, one of which is where people are sitting and telling these supernatural stories, kaidan, which are, just kind of creepy, like some of them are kind of folk tales or urban legends kinds of things. And then the other room, you've got 100 candles lit. And each person, as they have told a story, they get up, they go into that other room and they blow out one of the candles. And there might be a mirror there that you look into after you've done that. And then you go back and another person tells a story. And the idea is that as the candles get blown out and as the light gets dimmer and dimmer, that you're drawing closer to the world of spirit and who knows what might happen. You'll get things that talk about, oh, this was a test of courage for the samurai, but also it was really popular among townspeople, like ordinary commoners, the richer sort of ordinary commoners, because in the Edo period, it was a very literate culture. They had all kinds of books being published and collections of kaidan and so forth. So this was a game that people would play in Edo in Tokyo, during the Tokugawa period. And so, it was something where that got brought into L5R as the Game of 100 Candles. And, having established a pattern having the opportunity to continue a pattern for titling. Because I like it when you can look at books and go, clearly that is another one in this series without it being too repetitive, right?
Yeah.
So this gave me a good way to have people go, oh, that's probably related to the first book.
That makes sense. So it's kind of like watching a Twilight Zone marathon.
Yeah, well, and one of the things that happened while I was writing the book was I did the math on how long these gatherings must have been. Because even if the stories are short, 100 stories is hours of sitting there. So yeah, very much a marathon.
Oh, storytelling in a world before, TikTok.
Yeah, exactly. When we still had attention spans.
Yes. Yeah, it was much more of an established art, and people knew how to do it as well as how to be patient enough to listen. And I would hate to be the one who was terrible at telling stories.
I have a bit of a note of that in the gathering that it's some of the people are better storytellers than others.
Oh, and also if there's 5 of you or something. Yeah. It's 20 stories each. Oh, my Lord.
Yeah, I made it a smaller group. I didn't have 100 people there because I think they were rarely going to be 100 people. That's a lot to put in a room together. So every person is telling several.
I also don't know whether it's literally how often it would be literally 100 candles. That's a lot. In a pre-industrial culture, 100 candles.
Yeah. Which is why this was something done more by, kind of richer people rather than the poor. But
But yeah, I think it is a fantastic hook. I really enjoyed the book, by the way, and
thank you.
And all the stuff we learned. So, yeah, great book.
What kind of themes were you trying to carry across in Game of 100 Candles? About the world, about your characters?
So I'm generally not an author who kind of goes at things theme first. Not to say that there aren't themes that come out of my books, but usually for me, if I kind of have that in mind at the start, then I wind up writing something very preachy, as opposed to just writing a cool story and then looking back at it and going, okay, what do I have here? And how can I work with that? There is a bit of an exception this time, though, because, and again, this is me sort of dancing around the edge of spoilers, because of the way things go at the end of a night parade of 100 demons, I knew going into this book that I was going to be dealing with some ideas around disability for both Ryotora and Seken, that there are consequences to what they did in the first book. And so that was something that I did have to think about from the start rather than just, winging it and then revising later, because there's a lot of discussion these days around the representation of disability in fiction and, what's good, what's bad. So I certainly did talk to various people about that. A friend of mine, Effie Seiberg, was kind enough to let me read what she has so far of a draft of a book on the subject, so that I could kind of have those thoughts in mind around how was I presenting the situation for my two characters. So that is one where I did have to think about it more beforehand than I normally tend to do.
So it sounds like more you just kind of like, here's the situation, here's some characters, throw them in, see what happens.
Yeah. I'm more usually on the discovery end of writing, that it's, I just say, here's a cool idea, let's see where it goes.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. This does sound like something you may have had to, like you say, yeah, a bit more front-loaded.
Yeah. I mean, in general with these books, I do have to turn in a synopsis of the book before I write it, because they want to run it through canon approval, basically, and make sure that my ideas aren't going to be an issue. So I do have to plan more in general with these books, but that's more on the level of plot stuff rather than, like, what message am I trying to send?
So what themes do you feel kind of came out?
So there's the disability thing, but then because of Yumedo, and I'm sure we'll get to this some later, there's kind of the question of what life do people want for themselves, like what are their dreams? And you get to see that some toward the end of the book as Yumedo comes more to the forefront. And, it's an interesting thing to talk about with Samurai and L5R because of this idea that you're supposed to be freeing yourself from your desires. This is a very Buddhist sort of mentality. And that you should be putting your duty to your lord, to your clan, to your family, and so on, ahead of what you personally want. And of course, we're, supposed to generate all kinds of drama out of that tension in our games and our stories for L5R. So that comes up some as well.
I can definitely see how that fit in. And we will definitely talk about that in terms of the kinds of stories that you can tell using Yumedo. So I thought Night Parade of 100 Demons was so perfect as an exploration for kinds of stories you could tell with Chuksudo. And here this continues with kinds of stories you can tell with Yumedo. Will we see future adventures for Ryotora and Seken, do you think? Can you say?
Yes, I'm actually soon to be turning into my editor the first draft of The Market of 100 Fortunes, which you can tell I'm continuing the title pattern. That is almost certainly, like, I intend for that to be the last book of the series. I'm not going to continue after that. But that one, longtime fans of L5R may know that in previous editions, there was a location in Brittle Flower City or Captured City called the Bazaar of 100 Fortunes. I got permission to change the name of it to Market just because that is so far away from foreign influence that using a Persian-derived word seemed really weird to me. Yeah, so it's now the Market of 100 Fortunes. If it was in Unicorn Lands, sure, call it a bazaar. Like, go for it. But yeah, so I drag Ryotora and Seken out of both of their familiar terrain and down into Crane Lands.
Yeah, I think that would be the obvious next step.
Exactly. Yep.
And I've got to say, when it comes to like, do we call it a bazaar or do we call it a market? Like, we're all translating from the original Rokugani anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, and I had the word for what that is in Japanese, and now I've forgotten it. But there is a word for like a walled market district that is, essentially where they're going.
That's something for us to look forward to. Then we'll have to talk more about that when we get there.
Yeah, and I do wonder which realm they're going to suddenly randomly be visiting.
We'll find out.
However, we do definitely visit Yumido in this, and I think it's fair to say that as a spoiler or stuff, I think it's on the back cover, so that's why I felt it was fairly safe. Game of 100 Candles has a fair bit to do, or at least touches on the Moth Clan and Yumido, and that link between the Moth Clan and Yumido is kind of our first point of interaction between the two that we encounter in our standard L5R cosmology. Most of the clans don't have a much to do with Dream, the realm of Dream.
Mm.
And that's what Yumido is, the realm of Dream. I was wondering, Moth Clan is not spelled out in the source books. Where did you go to for your research on any of that?
Katrina. Like, yeah, straight up, I just emailed Katrina Ostrander to say, because I know that there was a reference somewhere to the Moth Clan having like Dreamwalkers, people who deal with Yumedo. And so, yes, I just emailed her and said, okay, what should I know? And she gave me what had been set up so far for the clan. I don't remember, or rather, she didn't even really tell me what sources that stuff was being drawn from, so I don't know what's published so far. There was one thing she sent me that she's like, here's a detail to know about them, don't put that in the novel. Like, all right. You could have just not told me. But honestly, like, what she sent me was just kind of shape my thinking a little bit, because almost nothing of what she sent, except for one detail about the Moth Clan having like sort of holdings of a sort in Yumedo, that I think is basically the only detail she sent me that I mention in the novel. The stuff about when they meet Kaikoga Hanemi and she's got a like a blindfold or an eye patch over one of her eyes, that was a detail I added because I know it crops up sometimes in Japanese folklore, the idea that, like, you know, being missing an eye, having only one eye is kind of like a trope for you've got supernatural powers, you've got second sight, whatever. So it seemed to me like that was a neat thing to mark the Dreamwalkers. She doesn't actually, like, she's not missing the eye because Rokugan is not super cool with stuff that sounds like blood magic. So, you know, I gouged out my eye for my powers is not kosher in this setting. But they symbolically sacrifice it by blindfolding one of those eyes and just not using it. So like that was a detail that I made up. Mostly what I got sent about the Moth Clan was just, okay, now I have the shape of them in my head and I will proceed to make things up.
For people who are interested in adding the Moth Clan, in addition to reading your book, Robert Denton has a Halloween story called Moth Follows Her Light that has a lot about Dream in Yumido and the Moth Clan in it. So we're going to talk about Yumido. I'm going to, in general, we'll talk about things that I've gotten from the L5R source books, and some of it I've got from Robert's story, A Moth Follows Her Light, and some of it from a Game of 100 Candles. And I was hoping we could just kind of, I've got a list of facts and stuff that we're going to try and get across, but please chime in, Marie, like if you have thoughts on any of this. You know, I might go and ask what you think about this thing or that thing so that we can like have a discussion about it. But that was my goal for what we do about Yumido.
Yeah.
Sound good?
Yeah. So yeah, Yumido, the realm of dreams. It's a setting. It's a place that can be visited in the game in Legend of the Five Rings, and it can play with different versions of a character's memories and hopes and, dare I say it, dreams. So it can be very personal for an individual, and if you can enter someone else's dreams, you can discover interesting secrets which they might not consciously be aware of or reveal in the waking world.
That is exactly why I find this kind of thing interesting. Like I love the whole dream realm idea. I actually feel a little bit guilty that I'm like, okay, so we also did a dream realm thing in the Rick and Rose books, my collaborator and I. Only there we have people who can't sleep instead of people who can't wake up. So I felt a bit like I was, copycatting myself. But I love the dream realm stuff precisely because it gives you that glimpse inside and that really personal angle, and especially in games, even more than in novels. I think the value of it is that, a novel can give you through the narration, through the characters' thoughts, what's going on inside them. But in a game, you don't really have that. Like, you can get players trying to describe their inner state, but that's still a thing that's inside their head. Whereas with a dream realm, you can take whatever their dreams are, whatever their nightmares are, and externalize it, which means it becomes something that other characters can interact with. And that's why I think this kind of thing is fantastic for games.
Yes, it makes a really good kicking off point for extremely personal role-playing game sessions. Thematically, it is often L5R in general is often kind of a we play at this balance you've kind of referred to earlier about the duty of a samurai versus their personal desires, and in our subconscious, in our dreams. That's where we process the conflicts of our waking life. On some level, that's part of our dreaming. We kind of deal with the paradoxes of our lives. So when you're playing it out in L5R, the dream ends up being kind of a reconciliation, or a kind of working out between what is the life of a samurai, where it's duty, service, and then the innate nature of humanity in L5R, and the sins, which in L5R are fear, desire, and regret. And so when honor doesn't allow you to do something, then Yumido might be the only freedom that a samurai has. And it ends up drawing that samurai from a reality that could be very painful because it doesn't allow them to be themselves, and into the dream where they can be what they are or what they want to be.
Yeah, I actually made up a philosopher for the novel who talked about exactly that, like the chance to kind of work these things out in dreams and sort of use it as like a release valve. But even there are some perils in that the guy got more and more involved in his dreams and kind of may have eventually just sort of gone into them and not come out again. So, it's not like that is a simple solution to that tension to just say, oh, well, you can, vent it all in dreams and then be fine in your waking life.
You do also get dreams being used by supernatural creatures, say yokai or Shadowlands creatures, sending temptations in dreams.
Yeah.
Or doing things in dreams to kind of tempt their prey or haunt their prey. This may not be necessarily happening in Yumedo as such, depending. So that they could be like, corrupting the dreams more directly in a time when the dreamer is more, vulnerable. Like when you're asleep, you're not able to necessarily defend yourself against someone trying to send temptations or illusions or something. But if you're in a dreaming state, it could affect you in your dreams and thus affect Yumedo indirectly. But I'm sure there are actually creatures in there, which we'll get to.
So yeah, once a dreamer becomes corrupt, then their dreams can be corrupted, which then turns their dreams back upon themselves, kind of drawing them deeper and deeper into that kind of corrupting cycle. So that's
yeah.
Now, I'll say that from a game perspective, I feel like that can be difficult rather to play out effectively because you need the player to buy into the idea that when their character is asleep and dreaming, that they're not necessarily going to have all of their self-control and their awareness of, oh, no, this is actually a problem and I shouldn't do it. And then if they give into something in dreams, to play with the idea that is then carrying over to their waking life somehow. I feel like that's the kind of story where you've got to get the player buying in to the idea that they're going to have this arc of falling prey to that desire, that temptation, that influence, rather than digging their heels in. Because it's always thorny in games when you're trying to do some kind of mental influence on a PC. That's always something that you've got to negotiate a bit with the player. And I think that's especially true when you're talking about this dream stuff, because you're basically saying, like, you should give into this thing that you know as a player is going to be bad. And I'm suggesting that you shouldn't have your usual defenses against it. I play with the kind of people who would be like, bring it on. I am so ready for this. But not everybody would be.
I mean, yeah, I think playing in the dream world at all has to have some buy-in, because you are basically saying, I want you to expose, your character's absolute innermost dreams, innermost self. And for a lot of people, that's very personal, and it's not. It's fine if you're, because some people, when they play a character, it's much more like a writer and a character. There isn't a direct connection. I'm interested in seeing what this character does. I'm interested in seeing this character fall over and spontaneously combust, and it'll all go horribly wrong, and that's going to be brilliant drama. But some people, it is more like a very good friend or even an extension of themselves. And I think you do need to be cautious, saying, okay, now we're just going to throw that open, and now everybody can rummage around in your deepest thoughts. Like it's a conversation, and you want to get buy-in, is what I'm saying.
The other thing, because this is a fantasy realm, and there is a real place called the Realm of Dreams that you could potentially get through a number of ways, but either physically or generally not physically. We'll talk about that too. It doesn't have to be a PC's dreams that are being corrupted by tainted yokai. So you could be having your characters interacting with, say, the daughter of the crab daimyo, who is now being bothered by tainted dreams, and now you have to try and figure out how to uproot the evil inside their dream space. So it doesn't have to be personal. It can be somebody else's dreams as well.
And
yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, that can help both the people who maybe don't want to do something that personal, and frankly, the kind of player who goes, okay, so the GM says, what is your character's deepest desire? And they kind of stare at you going, I don't know. Not everybody has those layers that they're really eager to explore something. Some of them, they're like, no, my character is exactly who they seem to be, and so they don't have exciting answers to those questions. And so, in both cases, having it be an NPC who's being explored, that means the GM can then come up with something cool, and both types of players are kind of off the hook.
Yes. And it's a way of exploring an NPC in a way that you cannot do almost in any other way.
And that's what I meant about the externalizing, right? It takes that inner life and it puts it out in the world where it becomes an interactable object, basically, rather than some, hidden thing.
Yeah.
The other thing that you can do with Yumido, which is really interesting because this is much more abstract or separated from an individual current person's dreams, is Yumido is a magical realm. In L5R it is, which implies that areas in Yumido that had really strong dreams, all right, were related to the dreams of many people together, could potentially continue to exist and sustain after the dreamers of all of those dreams have died. So you have this corner of Yumido can still be going on and existing, but the dreamers who created it are all gone now. This allows you to do time travel in your campaigns, to be frank.
Yes. Time travel, alternate realities could be there.
It used to be in the AEG days, because you have the whole old timeline of the Second Day of Thunder, which the good guys won, hurrah. But people were, but what if it's
the 1,000 Years of Darkness.
The 1,000 Years of Darkness. And it's pretty much established that the 1,000 Years of Darkness is a place you can go and visit, although I wouldn't recommend it. It's zero stars on Yelp.
Why would you want to?
Why would you want to? You could go visit the 1,000 Years of Darkness and find out what happened and what it would be like. And in fact, in the AEG times, someone from the Thousand Years of Darkness managed to get into the main timeline.
Yeah, I actually did a thing when I ran my own L5R campaign that used the Togashi Dynasty AU that I'd invented. At one point, and the metaphysical justification for this was Yumedo, the characters accidentally wound up in an alternate universe where the emperors were the Hante instead. So
What?
I sent them to normal canon as a weird dream realm.
And they're all shocked and
Which was
appalled.
fun.
And
So the other thing it can do is you can pop back to Battle of the White Stag or Dawn of the Empire or any kind of event.
Yeah.
yeah.
I will say when you do something like that, narratively speaking, you kind of have to consider, is it just that you want a chance for the characters to run around and experience this, and that's sufficient? Because if it is a dream, memory, echo, whatever of things, then what difference does it make if they save the Empress's life at the Battle of White Stag? Because they haven't actually changed history, which is probably for the best. But it means that there can be this feeling of we did a cool thing, but it's not real even within the fiction of the game.
Yes.
I recognize the game as a whole is already not real, but there's that extra. I personally hate when I see a movie or a TV show or something where, these amazing events happen, and then at the end they go, psych, it was all a dream. I hate having the rug pulled out from under me like that. But it's the reason I hate it is because the story was getting me emotionally invested, and then revealed that effectively I bought a narrative junk bond. My investment is fake.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in a game, the characters, if they end up at the Battle of White Stag, I think they're going to know that they are in
You
fact
can use
in a
it
dream.
to find a piece of information that has been lost to history.
Exactly.
Example.
Yes.
I agree. You were there and you learned something during that time.
Right.
Yes. And then you bring that forward.
Which I would love. Yeah, that kind of thing's great.
And you can possibly, if it's possible, because like I say, in the old lore, there's literally a whole human being who managed to get from a dream world.
Yeah, maybe they bring somebody with them.
Bring somebody with them, or they get an object, an artifact, and so they may not have changed the actual history, but they still, it still happened.
Yes,
and they have this concrete thing.
Right. And I think that's the difference between you've made a trip into Yumedo versus a TV that entire episode was just a dream. That the trip into Yumedo was real for the characters.
Yes. Yeah, that's a real thing.
Even if it was in this strange spirit realm. And so, yes, the possibility that what they do there can then have effects, real effects, that they have information or an item or something. That's kind of the option you have in this type of story that you don't in a more conventional, non-fantasy TV dream episode.
Yeah, I have to say, I do have a campaign that I'm never going to run for various reasons. But it's literally because I've gotten the old AEG supplements, which includes your Togashi Dynasty, the Imperial Histories and Imperial Histories 2, which are a whole bunch of different time periods. Here's how you could play different official, actual time periods that actually happened. And here's some that didn't happen. And here's one that might happen, a couple actually that might happen in the future, but might not. I thought, if I've got these two things, but I'm never going to use more than one of them, surely. But I thought, but no, if you use Yumedo, you can go to all of them.
Yeah. Well, that just made me think. This is basically I'm recycling the concept for the very first role-playing game I ever ran, which was Changeling, the Dreaming game. In Rokugan, people reincarnate.
Oh, yeah.
But they're supposed to have their memories of their previous lives washed away. But what if through Yumedo, they could see their previous lives? Fragments and echoes of their past incarnations, which are somehow relevant to what they're doing in the present day. That is essentially my first campaign, except that it was characters flashing back to their previous lives.
We kind of did that. We did something like that in a campaign that we ran here. It was not quite 1,000 Years of Darkness, but it was a fallen empire. The emperor's been taken over by evil, and your PCs are little last, scattered desperate holdouts, right? But they ended up about halfway through the game being trapped in a high-end court dream, and so they got to experience like the high refined formal winter court experience that they would never be able to get because that doesn't exist in the world as it was. And then they could take their own transformation, because I mean these were pretty scrappy guys at this point. They were able to take that with them into the future and see, oh, okay, there is beauty and hope and so on in the world. We have something we can create out of this just based on the vision. So they didn't bring a thing forward. They brought a transformation within themselves forward out of the dream.
You can tell I love dream realms because this is giving me all kinds of ideas. The latest one is, if your PCs are the sorts of people who would never be invited to Imperial Winter Court. They are nobodies. They are not important enough people. But they all have this collective dream in which they are at Imperial Winter Court and they carry out all of the stuff. And then they wake up. And then reports start coming of like the people that they talk to in that dream have suddenly changed their positions on certain political things or whatever, that effectively they influence those people through their dreams.
And there were these mystery people that people were talking about at court, but no one seems to know who they were. And
well, yeah, they either were present at court or it's just everybody was dreaming. And it's like, yeah, I dreamt about those people too. Weird. PCs could get in trouble for that. This, officials show up being like, what did you do? They're like, we didn't mean to.
So that gives a lot of ideas for kinds of campaigns that you could be running, and maybe we'll come up with some more adventure hooks or things like that at the end. But we can cruise along and talk about what is it like to be in Yumido, because there's a couple of spaces in Yumido we kind of think about.
For starters, I would say I think that the way we depict this kind of thing, and very justifiably, often doesn't look very much at all like normal real-world dreams. Because when you think about it, your normal real-world dreams, many of them fall into either the bucket of completely banal. It's, I'm back in high school, and I have forgotten to go to my math class all year long, and now it's the final. That's not the stuff of grand drama.
And then when you actually think about the dream, it's like, although I was back in my high school, that was not my high school.
Right. It was way larger than my high school is.
And it wasn't the same at all. Yet somehow in the dream, it was my high school.
Yes. And that's the other bucket that things fall into, where it seems really compelling and cool while you're dreaming it. Then you wake up and look at what you dreamt and go, that makes no sense and isn't actually nearly as interesting as it felt at the time. So we tend to make the dreams more coherent and interesting and plot relevant than, real dreams. And that's fine.
Yeah. They all make sense in a way that dreams don't.
Or when they're surreal in a meaningful way.
Yes, you don't just have, and then suddenly, okay, no, I need to explain that at this point, suddenly we're in a volcano, and then...
And my brother's a fish for some reason.
Yes, but that's not, it just happened, but never mind.
All right. Well, what we have from Celestial Realms is there's this concept of my eye, which is the area of space within Yumido that one individual dreamer controls. Okay? So that's the area around one dreamer, and they have full control over everything. Within that dream, it can be as realistic to normal life or historical events or whatever as the GM wishes. And that's kind of what you've talked about. It'd be more practical. If it's realistic, and even if it's somewhat not realistic, it's very difficult for you to know that you really are in a dream, because you're working on dreamland, especially if it's your own dream, because you're dreaming. So if, at this point, you kind of often you would use a meditation void check or something like that to have, especially someone dreaming, realize that this is a dream, because it's not obvious.
It sounds really great for a GM who's really bad at continuity. I can just say, oh, it's because you're dreaming.
Yeah.
Outside of an individual dream, most stories depict Yumido, who the references we've had to it, which haven't been a lot, as kind of this like endless featureless plain filled with white mist under gray sky. So it's just white, cloudy in between part, except it then dissolves into individual dreams as you pass through them.
Yeah. So if you're not in someone's dream, you're kind of not anywhere in a way. Yeah. That's very common. That does. Yeah. And lots of cloudy type imagery as well, like with the mist and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that your appearance within the dream you won't look like you. All right. You will generally be looked like the way the dreamer sees you, how they treat you, how they interact with you, whoever the dreamer might be. So your appearance will be flavored, at least in the Celestial Realms book as it sets it up, by one of the three sins, because everybody sees people associated with kind of the three sins about them, either reflecting fear, you're terrifying, or you're more scary than you are. Desire, you're more beautiful, you're more perfect, than you are. Or regret, which is you are somehow expressing through your physicality their regrets towards you, or the ways that they did not fulfill what they wanted.
That's the hardest one to do.
Yes, and it's not necessarily like they fear you, they desire you. It could be they fear something that you represent, or they desire a thing that you in the dream that they see you as having. So it's
a very flexible thing, because when you say they're flavored by fear, there are many types of ways that could go. Of they look like what you fear, you look like what they fear. You just see their fearful version of themselves. Like there's a lot of flexibility, and that's, I think, a key thing if you're trying to do something with Yumedo is be flexible. Like, this is all very mutable. This is all very individualized and personalized. It can be whatever suits the story that you want to be telling here. Like, don't worry too much about, is this correct according to the book? You know what? Maybe somewhere else in Yumedo, that's how things work. But where you are, it works the way you want it to.
Yeah.
Right. And if you want something like an example of how flavored towards regret is, fear and desire is somewhat easier. Flavored towards regret, maybe if they regret that they haven't advanced to a better position in the world, for example, then everybody around them, including you, are going to look haughty and wealthy and, powerful and stuff. And they are going to look like a little shriveled bean of a person.
Or one individual could be really lowly, and have clearly this is like their fear of what they think they could end up as, and they see that in front of them. And so some people are really obviously up in the clouds and are doing really well, and here's this other person. It's like, oh no, I hope that's not what I'm going to end up like. I feel that I have, and it can be all sorts of like symbolic and representative stuff like that.
Like, yeah, if they regret basically not having tried to pursue that person that they were in love with, and they just sort of let that go, then maybe they're like in mourning clothes, as if that person had died or something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe that person looks like they died.
Yes.
Maybe you look like a corpse.
And maybe you even just look like that person, and it takes you a while to work it out. Because you're their friend or whatever, but they're seeing you as literally as a different person.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a lot of fun stuff. I think there's also, if you've got the kind of players who are happy to take a bit of narrative control.
Yes.
You can say, okay, and then one, if you're in player character A's kind of dream and player character B comes up, you say to character A, what does your character really kind of fear, and how does this new character B's appearance, how does that reflect that? And they get to have that some control, like they would in their dreams.
Yeah. And then that actually, with the some bit of control, that gets into the sort of lucid dreaming question of the people who are aware that they're dreaming. And this is a real world thing. I know people who, they'll be asleep, they have a nightmare, they realize while they're asleep, wait, this is a nightmare. And then with that realization, they're able to effectively rewrite what their brain is giving them. So yeah, that is a real world skill, just not necessarily in a metaphysical, here off in a spirit realm kind of way.
So I was hoping that Kovar, you could start talking about some of the creatures that we might find in Yumido.
The realm of animals, Sakaku and Chikushodo, the realm of slaughter, and so on. There are denizens of Yumido that you can meet, and you find Yume no Seirei, which is a Baku. We'll get into Baku in general, but it looks like an emaciated old man who brings nightmares. You probably don't want to meet. That doesn't sound good.
Yes, he's a scary one. So another scary creature of Yumido that pops up in folklore quite a lot is a Makuragaishi, which is called a pillow shifter. And it was considered incredibly creepy to have the idea of a spirit that comes along and moves your pillow when you sleep. So you're sleeping and moves your pillow under you.
And the yokai out there.
Yes, this particular one has a big, if your pillow moves under you, your pillow is considered your anchor.
And these are the wooden headrest type of pillows, I should point out. Not the fluffy ones that we're used to.
So if your pillow moves, you might not be able to return to your body because you're no longer attached to your anchor that attaches you to the earth.
Yeah. I've got to say, so pillow shifter doesn't sound terribly frightening until you kind of, actually, that can be kind of bad. In general, there are creatures also called Baku. They're kind of really interesting. They kind of look elephantish. They've got elephantish trunks and all sorts of, one of those various kind of made up of various bits of other animals type of creatures. That's a very common description of them. They are mostly benevolent spirits that eat bad dreams. I always like them. They look weird, but I think they're cool.
The other people you can encounter in Yumido are Nezumi Transcendents. Nezumi, the ratlings, when they die or when their highest people die, their highest ancestors, their ancestors go on to inhabit Yumido rather than any of the other celestial realms. So you can find them acting as tour guides or sages or otherwise knowledgeable entities about the particulars of this realm, which is cool. You can find out. They'll at least talk to you in the way that Nezumi do. All right, so that leaves us with
how to get to Yumido. There's a pretty obvious way, which is to fall asleep.
Yeah. It's easiest as a realm to get to.
Not everyone remembers their dreams. I think a lot of people say they don't dream. I think that generally means they don't remember their dreams.
Yeah, I am terrible at remembering my dreams. I'm sure I have some because you kind of go insane if you don't have dreams, but...
I have an odd thing where I rarely remember them unless I wake up in the middle of them. That's kind of the only time I remember.
Yeah, the only ones I remember are my most horrific nightmares, or at least I assume they're the most horrific. There might be worse ones I don't recall, but
yes, let's hope this is the
ones
worst
I remember are pretty bad.
I remember. I can't say I remember them every night, but I'll often remember them, and then I tell them to my husband, and he uses them for game ideas. Because anyway, however, you were talking earlier, Maria, about lucid dreaming. So while you being asleep doesn't do much for anything really that you can interact with, once you get past that level to lucid dreaming, then you actually are able to interact with.
Well, I would say you can still be interacting with stuff, even if your character is not aware that they are dreaming and in control of that dream. Like I've actually got a little bit of that in the novel where Second is in a dream for a while before he goes, wait a minute, I know what's going on. But it does mean that the way you interact is going to be different. And that gets back to that player buy-in, that they have to go along with it in a, no, this seems totally normal and fine. I have no idea anything weird is happening.
And lucid dreaming, as I understand it, doesn't just allow you to change how you react. You can start to have, in a game sense, narrative control. You can start to say, well, actually, I don't feel like being in this high school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm
going to walk through this door and be somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah. And decide where that is, as opposed to, the usual thing of, and by the way, suddenly we were in a volcano. but that's fine. But you have control over it, which is and you can decide what you can do. So like you can decide, I'm going to go flying because I feel like it. Whereas if you're not lucid dreaming, you might start flying, but you don't really have a choice. So that's I think that's the difference with lucid dreaming. You kind of have control over not just you, but the whole thing of the dream.
And that is a key thing for a GM running this. Like you need to be ready to embrace that. If you're the sort of GM who doesn't like sort of players have narrative control of things mechanics, then you might not find this very fun.
Yeah.
If you're me and you love that sort of thing, rock on.
Now, how you get your character to lucid dreaming, of course, is and mechanically speaking, we talked earlier about potentially this being a meditation void check that you could be able to roll within
there might be a ritual, which is a ritual of how you go to sleep.
You can have characters who that's their natural talent. Maybe you have a certain. You could have. I could see, especially in 5th edition, people who have an advantage, lucid dreamer or vivid dreamer. And then they get lucid dreaming just by default, and then they can do certain kinds of re-rolls, maybe on premonition or something. So, because they dreamed that this would happen.
It can even be something where like there are multiple levels of that, because you could have the degree of you are at least aware when you're dreaming, leveled up. Like you can begin to shape your own dreams, leveled up more. You can shape other people's dreams, just to give it degrees of skill rather than it being an on-off button.
Yeah. And if you've got the lucid dreaming kind of talent, the distinction, then that gives you reroll.
So having it as an advantage or a disadvantage, ongoing nightmares. Dreaming can go into advantages or disadvantages to your characters. For certain groups, like the Moth or Nezumi, almost everybody associated with those is trained into at least some kind of lucid dreaming understanding, because that's just. Yeah, they do.
And if you're doing a one-off, if you're not doing this campaign is going to be dealing with dreams a lot, then because if they're not going to be dealing with dreams, being a lucid dreamer probably doesn't help you. But for that one-off thing, this is our normal campaign, but this little story is going to be based around dreams. Yeah, then you can have the NPC who's the Moth Clan Shugenja or the Nezumi Dreamer, who can then put them in the situation you want them to be in, whether they are going to someone else's dream in a kind of Inception type way, or whether they're exploring their own dreams. That they're the kind of key to get them there.
And even if it's something where like it's just the one-off bit, if you don't want to bring in a Moth and you don't want to bring in a Nezumi, I think it's entirely fair to just have it be like roll a particular ring or something like that. Just, basically let all of the PCs interact with the dream and succeed or fail based on their rolls, rather than having some sort of like, you need this justification for it, because maybe they just are alert enough to figure it out. You don't have to require anything of them.
But it could also, if you want to do it this way, it could also be a thing you now need to go and get.
Right.
So depending on what you want to do, like do you want to have a little side quest where they go and get the thing that lets them do it? Or do you just want to get straight into the meat of it, in which case, no, you just roll this meditation check and on you go. That's going to depend so those options.
It's a little different if you're getting to your own dreams and working with your own dreams, and then getting to somebody else's dreams, because we don't normally dream into somebody else's dreams, and that is what takes the push, right? If you're dealing with exploring your own dreams, or something that like a dream that has settled over an area and it's still your sleep, that's going to sleep. But if you want to, as PCs, intentionally get into, let's say, the Hida Daimyo's daughter's dreams to deal with whatever, then you need other ways to get in. So that's where you need to start thinking, okay, how do I get into their dreams? And you need something more of a push, like a Moth Clan Shugenja. Often, even if they've never come out with the stats for them or their school abilities or anything, but I would say that they would be able to get you there one way or another. And that's what you have NPCs for.
If it's a one-off, you don't even need to come up with proper game mechanics. It's a thing they can do. Yeah. There you go. Done.
Yeah. And Nezumi Dreamers should be able to do something like that. We've talked about them. Mm-hmm. A Shigenja created ritual of some sort. No mechanics, but if you got enough juice and Kami and everything else, and powerful NPC Shigenjas, they should be able to figure out something that can do it. So those are some ways that you might choose to be able to go there. Alternatively, something might drag you in, whether you want it to be or not.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, including those first three.
Well, yes, those first things. Yeah.
You have attracted the interest of a Nezumi.
Oh, no.
But it could be decidedly less friendly. So we did talk about monsters. So we talked about creatures of Yumido pulling you in for potentially good reasons or potentially bad reasons, or even just mess with you reasons. So that's kind of Chikusudo's area of forte.
Yeah, like pull you in for why not reasons.
Yeah.
I like the idea of supernatural poisons as well. So that can do that. So somebody is deploying a poison that does this, because the effect would be put somebody to sleep, they don't wake up, which is a great thing for a poison to do.
They could do it deliberately. Like, we know that this sends them into the realm of dreams and they can't get out. And that's what we want. But it could also be, hey, we found this stuff. It makes people go to sleep forever. It's fantastic. It's really useful. And then only afterwards do people point out, no, you're sending them into the world of dreams and that's mucking everything up. Please stop.
And it can even be rather than just like a one dose, you poison the person and they're gone. You could do a long-term poisoning over time, where it's something that maybe the person it could be more like a drug, that the person is taking this because, it makes their dreams so wonderful. But over time, they're spending more and more time asleep, and then eventually they don't wake up.
Yeah. So that can lead into all sorts of possible plot lines.
Mm-hmm. So this sounds like a great thing to stick in a Scorpion's campaign, where you wouldn't think it was going to go to Yumido. You didn't think that was going to be, but that's where it ends up, because poisons and drugs,
Oops.
Yeah, the Scorpion going, look, we're all for poisons and addictive substances, but you're using the wrong ones. Stop it immediately. These are bad ones.
And then there's always artifacts. So one that they've used is the Candle of the Moth Clan. That's one. But you could have obscure artifacts, or from before the Empire, or from foreign lands, or
it could be a pillow.
It could be a pillow. It could be anything. It could be an awakened pillow.
Yeah.
It's just trying to help. It wants you to have interesting dreams.
Or a pillow book, even.
A pillow book. Yeah. Yes, there's a artifact from old L5R where the headmaster of the Kikita Academy, way back in one of the earliest centuries, went out to confront an attacking crab army that was going to destroy the academy. And they don't know what she did, but when people got back, the crab army was gone, the headmaster was gone, and there was a book. And that was it. And it had the stories of the great battle, and then all the everything that resulted from it was all in this book. And that would be a Yubido artifact. She's the master of the key to the academy, just managed to create such a powerful vision or something that they pulled the whole crab army into their vision. And that would be kind of Yumido. It's kind of cool.
I just thought that a pillow book of dreams, where if you put it in your pillow, in your wooden headrest, can take you into dreams, and might take you into the dreams of other people, because people who dream with that in their pillow, the dreams start to get written down. And if you stay too long, you can get stuck there. But maybe someone can use that to get into your dream and get you back out, but that also runs the risk of getting stuck. That could be a fun one.
Or people could be using such an artifact to spy on very important people and find their secrets, because we talked about how dreams can reveal all of this stuff. And then it's like, how are they learning this secret knowledge that is...
See, dream realms are fun. You can do cool things with them.
Yeah, so I think we've slightly skipped ahead with the time traveling abilities of the Realm of Dreams to our plot hook.
You can.
Section, I think.
Well, we've talked about all of them. I think we've came up with plenty of plot hooks. So hopefully
Couple of whole
we've
campaign ideas.
somehow scattered through here things for people to think of and incorporate, and have something to bring into their campaigns. And thank you very much, Marie, for talking with us about them, because it makes it much more exciting.
I told you I love this kind of thing.
Excellent.
It certainly came across in the book, which is really, really good. And people should go read it.
Yes, people should go read it.
Yeah.
And get more ideas.
And the internet in general.
Where can we find you on social media? And what should we look out for? You talked about that.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Swan_Tower. There's also an MA Carrick account that is MA_Carrick. I am partially set up on Mastodon, but I need to actually get up and rolling there. So for the moment, Twitter is the place to find me. I'm also on Patreon, Swan_Tower, if anyone wants to take a look at my work there. But yeah.
Lovely. So I think everyone should go and check out those various places, find more about Marie Brennan's work. Lots of good stuff.
All right. Well, thank you so much again for coming. That's about it for us this week. I want to give a shout out to Fortune and Strife, which is our affiliated actual played podcast. We are approaching very quickly the end of season 2, so I'm excited about that. We've got some big things coming up to wrap up that season. And also we want to thank our friends at D20 Radio. This content is funded by the Community Discord Patreon, which supports us for our editing costs, our website, where you can see and store longer-term information, you get summaries of the podcast, and a lot of RPG tools and more. For our Patreons, we like to have some special bonus content like Adventure Seeds. We don't have a lot right now, but we try. There's early access to our AP podcasts and other things as we think of them or you request them.
Online, you can find us at courtgamespod.com. On Twitter, you can find us at twitter.com/courtgamespod. And if you want to support what we do, you can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/courtgames.
But that is it for us this week. This is Kikita Kaori. May the fortunes favor you.
And I have been Corvar. And until we meet again, keep your jade handy.